Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be reviewing a Twitter thread on how this person grew up in a Zionist home to give you an understanding about what the Zionists believe, how they become propagandized, and how they can really get to the point where they're committing the atrocities that they're committing in Palestine. So this person, Raphael Mimoen, which goes by @RafMim on Twitter, says, I grew up in a Zionist household, spent 12 years in a Zionist youth movement, lived 4 years in Israel, and have friends and family who served in the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, which on this channel we call it the IOF, the Israeli Occupying Force. When that is your world, it's hard to see apartheid when it's happening. Raphael goes on to say, I grew up in France in a Jewish community where the norm was okay, so this is the first really interesting part here. Listen to this carefully. I grew up in France in a Jewish community where the norm was unconditional love and support for Israel. So this person is admitting their community, their Jewish community within France, had loyalty to Israel and supported Israel. They don't mention anything about loyalty, love, or support for France. So you can't even really call it dual loyalty because these are people who grew up in a French Jewish community who supported Israel over France. Okay, this is by definition like enemies within the border. And he's admitting that's what this community was like. He goes on to state, Zionism wasn't even named because that's all we knew. Jews were nearly wiped out by pogroms and repeated Holocausts, and a Jewish state was the only way to keep us safe. Okay, so they believe a Jewish state kept them safe, but they were living in France and supported Israel over France. So this is just really, there's some things I want to say about this that I just simply can't. I'm not allowed on YouTube, which this video is going to be posted on YouTube. All Zionism is rooted in trauma and fear. It is first and foremost an ideology of self-liberation. It's about love Jewish people, survival for Jewish people, but Zionism is like any other ethnic nationalism. It's about prioritizing our safety and well-being. Okay, so when you have individualistic countries, like Western countries are, and you have one group that dislikes the country they're in and works as a tribe to take over the country, I don't know how else to put it, and they're admitting it here. This is a person who grew up in this and is just admitting it now. I don't know how you could not be concerned about this. This is how a very small group could take over a country. If the rest of the country is not working together because they believe in individualism, and you have one cohesive group, they can easily take over that country because no one else is working together. So he goes on to state, like all nationalisms, we were fed a historical narrative completely divorced from reality, that Palestine was a largely uninhabited piece of desert before we settled it, that in 1948 Palestinians willingly left because they were making room for Arab armies to throw Jews to the sea, that Arab leaders turned down all Israeli and U.S. peace offers and were unwilling to share the land, that Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East that despite terrorism, the IDF upholds the highest moral standards, and so on and so on. Okay, so a few other things here is, these people, Palestine did not have to welcome them. Okay, Palestine went out of its way to welcome these people to their country. I remember saying, and I'll go over this in another video, that you actually had to declare loyalty to Palestine whenever you immigrated there and got a Palestinian passport. And so there were these Zionist Jews who immigrated to Palestine, swore loyalty to Palestine, and then overthrew the Palestinian government because they wanted a Jewish supremacist government in charge of Israel, in charge of Palestine, which they wanted to rename Israel. Okay, going on. So the first reason that Israelis will never willingly make peace with Palestinians is that Israelis and Zionist Jews around the world live in a parallel world. Okay, they live in a parallel world. He's admitting this, that they don't have loyalty to the nations that they're part of whenever they are in their own ethnic enclave, that they support and love Israel above their nation that they're currently in. They note alternative historical facts, he says, that feed more nationalism, militarism, and extremism. The second reason is that the past 100 years of conflict have dehumanized Palestinians in the eyes of Israeli Jews. I mean this in a literal way. Israelis are not able to empathize with Palestinians. They aren't able to comprehend Palestinian suffering. And I have a number of different quotes I'm going to talk about in another video, which shows that Palestinian or Israeli people, Israeli journalists, Israeli politicians, they all dehumanize the Palestinian people. So when the idea, Raphael goes on, so when the idea of bombs Gaza and kills children, the average Israeli thinks that it is the Palestinians' fault for not agreeing to peace, for contributing to threaten and attack, or for continuing to threaten and attack Israel. 2, Israel is defending itself and that there is simply no alternative. The same rationale justifies Gaza's open-air prison, military checkpoints in the West Bank, bulldozing homes, etc. Israel even made up the term Hollywood because for them, it's all a show to turn the world against Israel. The suffering is either fake or self-inflicted. So the fact that they're bombing hospitals right now, they're bombing churches, they're bombing mosques, they're bombing schools, everything that Israel is bombing, they just consider it to be Hollywood, which is they consider a fake or deserved by the Palestinians, which is a horrific thing to say. Of course, there's some Israeli leftists and anti-Zionists who fight for Palestinian liberation, but it's a tiny and shrinking minority. Most Israelis don't consider what it means for Palestinian freedom, dignity, and physical well-being to be systematically erased. Israel is, by definition, an apartheid state. If a Jew and an Arab commit the exact same crime in the West Bank, they will face 2 different legal systems. The Jew will face a civil court, the Arab will face a military court. 2 legal systems for 2 ethnic groups. And Israel has talked about this as well, where they want to keep their population of Israel at least 70% Jewish. Okay, so they have a criteria there, which is really interesting because they try as much as possible to endorse multiculturalism in Western countries where the ethnic majority becomes less than 70%, but in their own country of Israel, they support at least 70% to be of the ethnic majority of Jewish descent. And it's kind of an interesting number because if you are an ethnic supremacist, a Jewish supremacist like the Israeli leadership is and like the majority of Israelis are, then why would you want even 70%? Why wouldn't you want 100%? Really what it comes down to is they want people to do the jobs that no one else wants. And so they have this underclass of 30%, up to 30%, that they allow to do the jobs that they don't think that Jewish people should be doing. And so really heinous, hierarchical, caste-based system, dehumanizing the non-Jewish population in Israel. Okay, so going on, Raphael says, but Israelis cannot fathom that this is unjust. When they fight against people calling the occupation of the West Bank apartheid, it's because Israelis genuinely believe that it's all self-defense and needed and legitimate. These 2 factors, alternate history and dehumanization, mean that it is physically impossible, and I mean that in the most literal way, for Israel to willingly end the occupation and agree to a just solution to the conflict. Peace cannot come from within Israel, okay? So we've seen that, and we've seen that America will support them no matter how many heinous acts, no matter how far along this genocide has gone. I believe it's by the end of this month, I think it was, if casualty numbers continue in November, that 1% of the population of Gaza will be wiped out by the end of this month. That's how heinous of a genocide is being committed there, that they're wiping out 1% of the population of Gaza. Raphael goes on to say that Israeli society is getting more extreme, more nationalistic, more violent, and more entrenched in its own historical narrative and its own self-victimization. At this point, it is simply delusional to expect that things will come from Israel. So, yeah, we're seeing this over and over again. And I think the reason for it is America and Israel are becoming more and more erratic because they recognize that their time in power is over, that the Zionists who controlled the West for the last 100-ish years, completely controlled the West in the last 100 years, that their time is over and that the Chinese and to a certain extent the Russians and their allies are overthrowing the unipolar world. And so Israel has to be scared in that situation because they need the rest of the world and really the rest of the Middle East in particular to be in favor of them because they can't survive if the United States doesn't prop them up. And the United States is not going to be able to prop them up for much longer if the United States has its own internal conflicts that it's going to be dealing with, which I suspect is coming this decade. Raphael goes on, the only thing that can bring Palestinian liberation is if the cost of the occupation outweighs its benefit, and that requires, just like for the apartheids in South Africa and the U.S. South, massive external pressure. Raphael concludes with, that means consumer boycott of Israeli goods, corporate boycott of Israeli technology, and sanctions by Israel's main trade partners and political supporters, the U.S. and EU. Those are the only measures that can meaningfully push Israel towards ending the occupation. Okay, so I'm going to talk about that more, various boycotts going on, various cutting of diplomatic relationships by other countries, things like that. So I would encourage you to stay tuned for my other videos. If you found this video to be informative about how Zionists think and how this person grew up in a Zionist background and overthrew the indoctrination, if you found this informative, please give us a like, a thumbs up, a heart, whatever it is on the app you're using. It helps us in the algorithm. Please subscribe to our channel on YouTube, Rumble, podcast players, whatever you're listening or viewing this on. Please leave a comment in the comment box below. I do read all of them. Any questions, concerns, critiques, comments, etc. you might have. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.